So in order to explore our JavaScript elements initially, we're going to use an environment called Node. We'll run Node right at the command line and then type in basic expressions like 3 plus 5, or we'll use our operators such as the equality or the not equals to operators. And we'll explore it right within the command line in our program called Node. Node you will have downloaded and installed. And Node is a valuable system not only for running JavaScript from the command line, but later on for example, serving our web pages. And the way that we'll open Node in a window is that we will open a command window on Windows. On Mac computers, you'll open a terminal window. The terminal application can be found in your Application/Utilities folder. You might want to drag it onto your application's dock, since you will be using it frequently in this course. On Windows, we'll open a command window. And we do that by clicking on the Windows icon and, in the dialog box, typing CMD. Now we're ready. You have your command line open, and we can type the word Node in order to run the Node program. We type Node, and that's it, we're running. We have a different prompt, and that's how you can tell that you're within Node. Node is patiently awaiting your every JavaScript command. So now let's type in some expressions and see how they get evaluated. So numbers evaluate to themselves. So if I type a 3, it evaluates to a 3. Strings as well evaluate to themselves. If I type in a string, which you'll recognize because it's in quotes, and hit return, it evaluates to the string that I typed, hello. If I type in an expression, such as 3 plus 5, this uses the plus operator on two numbers, and when that expression is evaluated, it will return the results of the evaluation. And sure enough, we get the number 8 returned from Node. It wouldn't be bad to get in the habit of typing a semicolon at the end of each line, since when we type code into files, we'll need to do that. So if I do that here, I can type 3 plus 5 again, and do the proper thing by adding a semicolon to the end of the line, and I get the same thing. The expression evaluates to 8. Now I'd like to introduce to you the mod operator. The mod operator divides one number by another and gives us the remainder. So if we take 6 and mod it with 3, we're dividing by 3 and getting the remainder. What will we expect to see? Well, 3 goes evenly into 6 2 times without any remainder at all. The remainder should be 0. Let's see if that's what we get. We get a 0. If we mod 7 by 3, on the other hand, 3 goes into 7 twice with 1 left over. So the mod operator is going to provide us with that remainder, and that will be 1. So I'm sure you'll remember dividing with remainders from your childhood arithmetic class. But in computer programming, the mod operator turns out to be quite useful for counting in cycles. And we'll see that when we start programming more involved programs. So now let's move on to variables. Variables, as I said, we can name however we would like. So what happens if we just type in a name such as x? X is not a string. You don't see any quotes. So it's going to be evaluated and its value returned. So what is its value? And conveniently, we get an error with a lot more information than we really want to know about. This is because we didn't declare x to be a variable yet. That we do using the var keyword. When we want to declare a new name for a variable, an entity that will hold values, we use the keyword var. So I type in var x and my semicolon. I hit return. And it's undefined because the var as an operation is not defined, and we haven't assigned an x, a value to x yet. But now let's do that with one of our assignment operators. The equals sign is the assignment operator. It assigns a value to a variable. So if we say x equals 34, for example, and hit return, we get the value 34. Now, let's see what happens if we just type x alone. X will also be evaluated. But now, x is a variable that's holding a value. So when it gets evaluated, we should see what that value is. X is 34. So now, as I said, variables are, in fact, variable. We can assign it a new value, and let's do that. X equals 42. Hit return, and the new value is apparently 42. If we type x alone, again, it's 42. We can see that the value of x has changed. It's no longer 34, x is 42. That entity is holding the last value that was assigned to it. One convenient way to name and assign a variable is to do it all in one line of code. So I can define a variable, and again, I can name it whatever I want. There's no right or wrong way to name a variable. Var foo, and right on this same line, I can assign it a value. A variable can hold any kind of value. It can be a number or a string. And just to illustrate that, I'm going to assign it to a string. So now that line is undefined, but foo has been assigned to a value. And when I just type foo and return, it will be evaluated, and the value will be printed. And we can see that foo is now hello. I can define another variable, bar, var bar, and set it equal to foo. So now what's the value of bar? If I type bar and hit return, what do we expect to see? Think about it for a moment. It could be foo, but it's not. Why? Because foo has a value, and that value is hello. So when we assigned foo to bar, bar took on the value of foo. Foo was evaluated, and its value was assigned to bar. So when we evaluated bar, we got hello. So my window is full, and I will clear and refresh it with the Control-L keystrokes. Now we'll go on to talk about assigning values to variables. So I can assign the results of an expression to a variable as well. Not just numbers, not just strings, but the results of expressions. So x, which is a variable already declared as a var, x equals 4 plus 9. So in this case, what the computer is going to do is going to take 4 plus 9 as an expression, evaluate it, get the result, and then assign the result to the variable x. And that value is, of course, 13. So now x, if I just type x, has the value of 13. Sometimes you'll see the shorthand operators, plus equals, times equals, minus equals, and divide equals. So one thing we could do is look at the value of x, which is now 13. If I say x equal to x plus 1, what's that going to do? Well, the value of x is currently 13, so the value of x will be added to 1, and we'll have 14. That's the result of the expression. And the result of that expression will be assigned to x, and x will be what? You're right, 14. So there's a way to write that in shorthand with the plus equals. So right now, x has the value of 14. I can write x plus equals 3 And what this is going to do is take the value 3, add it to x, and then return the value to x. So here, since the value of x is 14, what do we expect to see? You're right, 17. So that's a shorthand. X plus equals 3 is exactly the same as x equals x plus 3. The other shorthand notations are similar. So we've seen what the plus operator does with numbers. It adds them together. But the plus operator can also operate on strings. This will be very important and very useful, so it's worthwhile to take a minute to explore how this works. So for example, let's create 2 different variables and assign them to 2 different strings. Let's create and assign the variable foo to hello. Next, we'll create and assign the variable bar to the string world. How do I know it's a string? I'm quoting it. Semicolon, return. So if I look at bar, it is now world. Now let's see what the plus operator does when I try to add strings together. So let's look at what foo plus bar evaluates to. Can you think of what it might do? We've seen how the browser and JavaScript does the right thing in many cases. So what would be the right thing in this case? Foo plus bar is the string hello world. What happened here? The plus operator operates on strings by concatenating them, by sticking them together end to end. So if your hello world doesn't have a space between the 2 words, you can fix that right now. It's interesting to explore, and you'll understand then how this works. You can see my little trick. I actually added a space after hello in the string itself when I created foo, so that hello world would look right when I concatenated them. So that's what the plus operator does for strings. You can also add multiple strings together. So if I type hello plus a space as a string, that is a space between quotes, plus world as a string, I'll get pretty much the same thing. Hello world. I've added 3 strings, just like I can add 3 numbers. The plus operator works that way, and with strings, it concatenates. Let's try something else just to see what happens. What if I type and add hello plus my space plus world. Now, world is not quoted. That means it's not a string. That means it's going to be evaluated as a variable. It's a variable I haven't created yet, so it has no value. What's going to happen here? Well, let's try it. It helps to explore. I get an error because world doesn't have a value. Let's try something else a little risky. We like to live on the edge and live life dangerously here. I'm going to add the string hello to the number 3. Now what do we expect to see? Now I get hello 3, all concatenated together. How did that happen? 3 is a number and hello is a string. So the system, apparently, is smart enough to know to convert the 3 to a string first, and then treat it as a string and concatenate it to hello. That's exactly what happened. And the plus operator in this case was not adding numbers. It was adding 2 strings together after it automatically converted 3 to a string. If I type hello as a string plus 3 as a string, I will of course get exactly the same thing, and I won't make the system work to do its default action of converting 3 to a string first because I've written it as a string. and I get hello 3. So we're going to use, when we program, the plus operator to construct long sentences and messages to ourselves. So the plus operator is very important, both as the addition operator for numbers and as the concatenation operator for strings. Okay, let's clear our screen again. Do you remember how to do that? Control L. And now let's look at logical operators. When logical operators are used in expressions, they return the value true or the value false. The triple equal sign is the equality operator. It tests two objects to see if they are exactly the same thing. So if I type now 3 == 5, what do we expect to see? It's false. The logical operators return either true or false. What about if I type 3 == 5? What do we expect to see in this case? Well, that's a true statement, right? 3 is not equal to 5. That's true. And so evaluating that expression returns true. Let's remind ourselves, what was foo? Foo was hello. What was bar? Bar was world. So we can type foo and test it for equality with bar. That is, the equality operator works not just with numbers, but also with strings. So foo, which is hello, and bar, which is world, is false. What we're comparing is not the word foo to the word bar, but the value of foo to the value of bar. Both are evaluated, and then the logical operator tests them for equality. And just to go through a couple of these other logical operators that we'll be seeing in our code, let's look at 3 < 5. And we see that that's true because 3 is in fact less than 5. 3 < 5, also true. Is 3 greater than or equal to 5? Of course, that's false. So that's my introduction to these numbers, but of course there are other operators that we've presented to you in the slides, and I encourage you to go and explore them. You have your Node window open. Go ahead and check things. Don't worry about your errors, just hit return and keep going. It's very forgiving. And explore and get familiar with these basic operators and basic elements of JavaScript. Later on, we'll use these elements and build more interesting programs.